Okay, there's our wideband and a little snip snip. It's the day after the dyno. The car is back in the garage, but parts are already off of it. So let's talk about what happened. So yesterday, went back to Kinetic Auto Works and hooked up with Mike the tuner. Larry from 20 Square Fab came down, joined us, and we put the Camaro back on the dyno. So last time, to recap, it was on the dyno. We made some pulls. We made a peak of 370 horsepower, which wasn't bad. When Randy first put this motor together, it made 380. This motor's been together for 15 years. I'll talk about that more in a little bit. So a 370 from 380, I'm fine. 10 horsepower difference on a dyno, and the dynos are 10 years apart. Perfectly okay. We ran it, but we were running into a problem where at 6,600, we're going real fat, having all sorts of problems. We tried a bunch of stuff. You can go back through the threads, everything else, but we redid a lot of ignition components. We ran it, and we thought, fingers crossed, we'll be good. Well, we hit the dyno. The good news is the car made more power than it ever has before. So the car managed to make 420 horsepower and 413 foot-pounds of torque. It's more than it's ever made before. We're still having the problem. 6,600 RPMs. The car goes really fat and it drops like 200 horsepower. It's like it hits a wall. So there are two things that we think might be happening. And I'll talk about the first one and then I'll mention the second one because the second one's more expensive and we're going to mess with that one later. So the first problem. So this right here, or more specifically, this right here, is our first problem. The lack of charging might be why I have two batteries in this car right now. At Dixie Tour last year, this battery died. I thought I didn't have enough reserve capacity, so I added that one. Well, maybe I didn't need it. So after we figured out that I'm an idiot and I don't know how to hook up an alternator, we wired it up temporarily to get the regulator working. And yeah, it worked. The car started to charge. But even after it started to charge, we never saw more than 13.1 volts, even running it up high in the RPMs in the log. So alternator's still a little bit suspect. Our theory right now, or at least the cheaper theory right now, is we're blowing out spark at 6,600 RPMs. We're thinking that the alternator isn't providing enough current to the coil, and the coil can't keep up. And it's possible that coil might even be burnt out. So fresh coil, because that's cheap. Alternator, because we know that we need it. We'll get it all together. I'm going to simplify, go to a one battery setup in the back for now. We'll get that all together, see if we're charging over 14 volts. If we are, awesome. We're going to go back to the dyno. If we go to the dyno and we still have that problem, then it's probably issue number 2, which I'm thinking might be valve float. So in the past, this motor has revved to 7,500 RPMs with power dying off around 7,300. That was back when Randy ran it on the dyno. So in theory, everything in there should keep doing the same. Well, I mentioned this motor has been assembled for 15 years. That's quite a while for a motor with some heavy-duty springs. It's possible that the valve springs have weakened over time and we're just hitting valve float at 6,600. But the motor is super healthy up until that point. It is 420 and climbing, and then it hits that 6,600. So there might even be a little bit left of this. So I'm really excited. It's going to make more, well, it is making more power than ever, and there's a chance we're going to make it even better. So I'm going to make a couple changes in the back of the car. We're going to simplify it, go down to one battery. I'm going to rewire how the computer's hooked up, put a little margin of safety in there, and then we'll wait for the alternator to go out, will show up. Guess that's what your workbench looks like after you go to the dyno. All right, so I'm working in the back of the car while I'm waiting on some parts to show up, and one of the things I'm doing, if I haven't mentioned it already, is I'm converting from the dual battery setup I had to a single battery setup. There's potential for there to be some electrical gremlins causing us trouble in the dyno, so to eliminate that, we're going to go to a single battery. It lets me move some weight around too, so if it ends up working for a single battery, great. But one of the things I want to do is I had a really cool billet mount over here that I pulled out for the secondary battery, and I want to use it here. You can see there's some witness marks where the battery is slid back and forth. My solution to that was to take this hold down I made and tighten it tighter, which worked, but it was pretty sloppy. So I want to use that billet bracket I mentioned. I'm going to drill some holes in this. This guy's going to sit in there. We'll have our cool billet hold down, and our single battery will be put in place. Let me make some holes in the car. What else is new? Okay, so that's in there. Obviously, I'm going to need some longer bolts because those weren't quite ready for the spacer. And then there's the issue along the back. Let me show from underneath. So you can see from underneath that there's nothing to secure this to. I'm going to make a strap that runs across the back underneath. It sandwiches this battery holder and this one together, and we should be good to go. Nice billet, secure, ICT, I guess that's who I got it from, battery hold down, and then we can get to the rest of this. Holes are drilled. I did a little cleanup and painted because it looked like crap, so why not? I didn't clean up that well, so I painted over a lot of dirt, including over here where I've had ballast and a battery and all sorts of other stuff mounted. Did whip up a quick bracket to back that. Got some bolts, so let's put the bracket in and see what it looks like. All right, so the new bracket is in. And if I'm like any other YouTuber, I will do a Thanos snap. And there's the battery installed. So it's definitely not going anywhere. So if you're hearing some sick music in the background, it's because I'm on hold with Summit. And I wanted to show you, I've got things wired up back here. I did install a fuse for the ECU that was not there before. There's a fuse at the front of the car, but there's a big long run of wire that wasn't fused. So rather than burn the car down, I put that in. Okay, so they got me, I was not on hold very long. That was awesome. So anyway, put in a fuse for the ECU that runs backward down to the single battery. It's all wired up here, and a little bit of other news. I hooked the old alternator back up. This is the one that we weren't seeing a charge from. But when I put it back in, I was curious about something. So I put this nice big heavy ground strap. So it runs, that ground strap runs from the bottom, meets that machine surface there, right to the head. And actually that's a common ground to the chassis. It's well grounded. But I fired it up, warmed it up, and when I revved it, I saw charging. So I think the alternator issue is resolved. That was not our problem. I have a spare coil. I haven't put it in yet. It's looking like, unfortunately, well, and fortunately, that it's going to be valve springs. So I'm going to get some valve springs ordered up. We're going to put them on this motor, and we're going to get ready to go back to the dyno. All right, one more update. You saw the ground strap before, but I went and put a big old fat ground wire on this thing. Power Master says it should be at least the same size as your power wire, so it's a little bit bigger. Should work great. Now we're just waiting on some parts so we can tackle some other stuff. All right, so before the last dyno session, one of the things I did was swap out the Innovate wideband, which I killed 2 sensors. seen stuff on the internet, they were a problem, but it's what I had before. But I swapped it out for an AEM unit, which everybody said works great. And when I set it up, it did. And then on the first dyno pull, it died. It was just showing all dashes. So I tweaked it a bit and didn't have a lot of luck. You can see in this video right here. And it failed. That's interesting. All right, so I reached out to AEM and they're sending me a new O2 sensor since that one is broken, but they made me prove on film that I destroyed it. So back to the main project, what we think is really wrong. Been waiting for parts to come in, and here we go. We have a new set of valve springs. We have new locks or keepers. New valve seals, not that we need them, but we're going to be in there. And then this, titanium retainers. When I called Comp Cams, my dude there, Fred, was awesome. Not a sponsored post at all, but they were super helpful there. He got me set up with the springs I needed, everything. And then we went and looked at retainers, and they had no retainers. No titanium, no tool steel. They had no retainers, and we're not going to have any until June. So I made some calls, looked around the internet, and I finally found a place in Joliet, Illinois, who had a set of these Comp titanium retainers on the shelf. They were cool enough to ship them to me so we can get this thing back on the road. So I guess let's take everything apart. Well, it looks like the spring compressor is bending. That's not good. So the new Comp Cams tool showed up. This is part of it. The rest is in the box over there. And it looks like it's going to work, but I have to remove the guide plates for the push rods before I can put the tool on. So there's going to be some extra steps involved here, but let's see if we can at least get the first set of springs replaced. Wish me luck. All right, call me a coward. I did one valve seal. I'm not gonna do the rest. I screwed 2 of them up in the process, and this thing didn't smoke beforehand, so I'll probably regret it, but I'm not gonna do that. Anyway, let's put new springs in.
Better drink up. Better drink up. Don't move. Don't talk out of time. Don't think. Don't worry. Everything's just fine. Don't move. Don't talk out of time. Don't think. Don't worry. Everything's just fine. Just fine. I got myself together. Now I'm messing it up again. I'm going down swinging. I'll never give it up now. Better drink up. Better drink up all your poison. Drink up all your poison. Better drink up. 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 Drink up all your poison. Better drink up.
Spared you all a time lapse of me doing valves. It just looks the same as me replacing the springs, just me bent over and hurting my back. So we're gonna go ahead, fire it up, and get things up to temp. I've set cold lash. We're just gonna get things up to temp, check it with hot lash, and hopefully we're good to go. So I'm gonna turn on some fans and see what happens. kind of clear the air a bit before I can get it up to full temp, or I'll die in here. Let's warm it up again. All right, let's check lash. It's a weird angle, and my hair is probably great. So far, success. I went ahead and checked hot lash. Let the motor get to like 180. I think they want you closer to 200, but got it to 180. Checked it on a couple, and it was a little tight, but that's good. Like I set it up to be tight, so I'm gonna let everything cool down. I'm gonna check it with cold lash once again, all the way around, just make sure everything feels right, feels good. But I think we're pretty much there on this. I ordered a valve spring tester just for my own sanity check that shows up tomorrow. I'll throw that into the video, and then I'll probably wrap this video up. But we got the valve springs done. Everything's looking good. New springs, new retainers, new locks. I did replace the sensor for this dummy light for my oil pressure. It seems to be working better, like not just on all the time. And I did replace the O2 sensor for this AEM gauge. They sent me one out of warranty, excuse me, but it's reading all zeros, so not great. The only other thing worth mentioning is I did swap out the alternator pulley to this teeny tiny little guy. Look, it's so cute. It's so cute in there. Anyway, I swapped that out, and now I'm getting over 13 volts at idle, like 13.3 to 13.5. So I think the charging issue's fixed. Valve springs hopefully fixed. We'll know because I'll test the old ones later. I mean, I think we're getting ready to rock. So tomorrow we'll check those valve springs, then we'll button everything up, get this video up, and hopefully then very shortly after this video goes up, we'll be back at the dyno and seeing what the final horsepower number's on. So we made 420 horsepower last time, and I think we can beat it. So let's check those springs tomorrow, and we'll wrap this up. Spring tester is here. The spec for the springs that were on there are 332 pounds per inch. So we're going to take one of these, chuck it up in the vise, and get a measurement. And we're going to do it for all of them. And we'll see how bad things are. First one is 270. So that's bad. Let's check out the rest. Okay, every spring has been tested, and you can see they didn't do great. The best one measured out at 300. The worst, there were a couple 270s. Most for the 280, 290 range, which is still well under where they're supposed to be. So I'm feeling pretty good about that being the issue. Obviously, we're going to have to go to the dyno and find out, but I've kind of done everything I can. We'll see what happens. So, cross your fingers, next video should hopefully be the dyno session. I'm going to end this one now. It's gone a little long. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks to Krime Slugs for making a custom song for this episode, I guess? Sure. Thanks to Krime Slugs for making the custom song. Go check out their Bandcamp. The intro song is done by my band, Subtastic, so go check that out too. And then this is where I beg for likes and subscribes and all that stuff. But thanks for watching.